Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video we're looking at some injury updates, a small trade we saw from our past couple of days, some waiver updates, a couple of suspension updates, plus we got some trade rumors involving the Blues, Predators, Blackhawks, Hurricanes, Utah, and a couple of other teams. With all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the video here at the End to End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. We're on a road to 500 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. Really does help out the channel. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all that was discussed in today's video. Would love to hear your guys' opinion on all that was discussed here today. Plus, don't forget to stay tuned for my March 7th trade deadline video next Friday at 11:30ish Mountain Time. I'm going to be doing a live trade deadline video discussing all the trades that happened before the NHL's trade deadline on March the 7th. So we'll touch on all that at that point in time, but in today's video we got another news and rumor video to discuss. Lots of intriguing things that are going to be happening from our past little while that I want to touch on here. So we usually start off by talking about some signings, but there have been no signings from our past handful of days. So we'll go over to a couple of injury updates from our past couple of days. Had a long list of injury updates. Jordan Eberle, who we said was on a conditioning stint, was recalled, was officially activated off of long-term injury reserve after missing 3 months with a pelvic injury and returned to game action on Saturday. So it's a really big boost there for the Kraken to see Eberle, who was out for quite some time and is the Kraken's captain, get back into the lineup. So that's really good news there for Seattle. Louis Crevier, who had missed 3 weeks with a concussion, was active off of injury reserve and reassigned back to the minors. So Crevier will continue his development over in the AHL. That's great news there. Well, Jason Dickinson, who has missed a few games now due to a lower body injury, was placed in injury reserve. So it's a bad blow there for the Hawks. Dickinson's been a really good middle six forward, so hopefully he won't be out for an overly long period of time, but interesting injury update there for the Hawks. Pittsburgh's Evgeny Malkin, who had missed 6 games, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so big boost there for the Penguins to get their second line center back into the lineup. Well, Matt Grzelyck left Sunday's game with an upper body injury and did not return, so it's a bad blow there for the Penguins. Grzelyck's actually been one of the better defensemen on the Penguins blue line and as a potential trade chip, so not overly great to see him go down with an injury. Flair's Matthew Tkachuk missed Saturday's game due to a lower body injury he sustained over in the Four Nations, and he may be out for a little while, so I'm not sure exactly when his timetable is for him to be back, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be back at some point in the next little while, so Chuck might miss a little bit of time there for Florida. Andrew Kopp left Saturday's game with an undisclosed injury for the Detroit Red Wings and has now been placed on injury reserve due to it, so it's a bad blow there for the Red Wings. Kopp's actually been a decent middle six forward this year, so to see him go down with an injury is not overly fantastic news there for Detroit. San Jose's Nico Sturm, who has been out for over a month with a lower body injury, was active off for injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so big boost there for the Sharks to see Nico Sturm get back. He's a solid fourth line center and also a potential trade chip, so really good stuff there for San Jose. Adam Lowry, who has been out for over 3 weeks with upper body injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so that's going to reunite that third line for the Winnipeg Jets and gives the Jets back their captain, so it's a big boost there for the Jets on the injury side of things. Emil Heineman, who had missed 5 weeks after being hit by a car, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so really great to see Heineman's okay, and it's a big boost there for the Canadiens bottom six to see Heineman get back into the lineup. Columbus's Sean Monahan and Erica Branson have both started to skate for Columbus and could be nearing a return in the next couple of weeks. It could be a really big boost there. Branson hasn't played since October and Monahan's been out for probably close to a month now due to their respective injuries, so a big boost there if the Jackets get those guys back in the not too distant future. Toronto's Max Pacioretty will miss both weekend games on Saturday and Sunday for the Toronto Maple Leafs due to an injury sustained during practice last week, so that's a bad blow there for the Leafs as they lose a solid depth scorer for the next couple of games. New Jersey's Nico Hischier, who has missed a month due to an oblique injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so big boost there for the Devils to get their second line center back into the lineup and their captain as well. Buffalo's Jordan Greenway, who hadn't played since December 15th with an undisclosed injury, and Matthias Samuelsson, who had missed 2 games due to a foot fracture, were both active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so it's really great to see Greenway be healthy now after missing so much time this year due to injuries. While it's also good to see that Samuelsson, who has been in and out of the lineup over the past couple of years due to injuries, get back into the lineup, so that's a really good boost there for the Sabres to get a top 9 forward and top 4 defenseman back into the lineup. Carolina's Tyson Jost, who had missed 19 games with a lower body injury, was active for injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday, so big boost there for the Hurricanes as they get a little more depth in the forward group by having Jost activated. Vegas' William Karlsson and Cole Schwind are both now practicing in regular jerseys and should not be too far away from returning to game action, which could be a big boost there for Vegas to see both William Karlsson, who's been a solid third line center, and Cole Schwind Schwinn, who's been a decent bottom 6 forward, get back into the lineup. While Tyler Pearson was activated off an injury reserve after missing 2 games and returned to game action on Saturday for the night. So it's a really big boost there for Vegas to see Pearson get back, and hopefully Karlsson and Schwinn won't take too long and should return in the not too distant future. Brady Tkachuk missed Saturday's game due to a minor injury he sustained in the Four Nations and his day-to-day, so it's a bad blow there for Senators to lose their captain for the next little while due to an injury. Colorado's Valimaki and Josh Manson won't travel with the Avalanche on their upcoming road trip as they continue to deal with their current injuries, so it's bad blows there for both Manson and Nichushkin, as the Avalanche will not have one of their top 4 defensemen or top 6 forwards with the Avalanche for their upcoming road trip. Minnesota's Kirill Kaprizov, who has been dealing with lower body injury for a couple of weeks now, will be out longer than expected and will probably miss at least another couple of weeks. That's a bad blow there for the Wild to see Kaprizov still be out. Thatcher Demko was placed in injury reserve due to his lower body injury, and he's still scheduled to be out week to week, so that's a bad blow there for the Canucks, but that's still just more of a roster move to get some roster flexibility. Chris Kreider missed Sunday's game due to an upper body injury and is out day-to-day for the Rangers, so that's a bad blow there for Rangers to see Kreider go down with an injury. Logan Cooley got back into the lineup for Utah on Sunday after missing a few games with a lower body injury, so that's really good news there for Utah to see him get back into the lineup. John Gibson left Saturday's game due to an upper body injury and should be out for at least a little bit due to his injury, so that's a bad blow there for the Ducks. Calgary's Connor Zary, who had missed 15 games with a knee injury, and Kevin Ball, who missed 8 games due to undisclosed injury, were both active for injury reserve and returned to game action on Sunday, so big boost there for the Flames to get a solid second line center and solid third pair defenseman back into the lineup. And Boston's Hampus Lindholm has now been announced that he's going to miss the rest of the season due to the bone fracture he sustained earlier in the year, so it's a bad blow there for the Bruins, as Hampus Lindholm's a solid top pair defenseman, so seeing him be out for any period of time is a bad blow there for Boston. So some interesting injury related to the past couple of days. Good to see guys like Zary, Cooley, Greenway, and Hischier, amongst others, all get back into game action. Hopefully they don't look too bad in their returns. So bad news to see guys like Dickinson, Kreider, Grzelyck, and the Tkachuks all go down with an injury, and hopefully they aren't out for an overly long period of time, but some interesting injury related to the past couple of days. Next, we're going over to a quick waiver update. We only saw 2 waiver updates from the past couple of days. Back over on Sunday, we saw Juuso Valimaki be placed on waivers by the Utah Hockey Club. Valimaki was a waiver claim of the Arizona Coyotes about 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was now. He worked out quite well as like a second, third pair defenseman over the past couple of years in Arizona, but this year, after the additions that the Utah Hockey Club's made, with them starting to get healthier, Valimaki started falling on the depth chart a little bit, so didn't really need him, so I placed him on waivers. Now, he doesn't make an over amount of money. I think he's making like between $1 and $2 million right now, and is on a 1-year deal, so I thought there would be a chance out there that if a team was in desperate need of some defensive help and had the cap space to do so, that Valimaki could wind up getting claimed. He's a former first-round pick back in the 2017 draft, so I thought it was a possibility, but he has wound up clearing. There's been some recent speculation that after he's cleared, it could be a trade candidate for the Utah Hockey Club, so we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Valimaki as a potential trade candidate. But surprisingly, at least to me, Juuso Valimaki did indeed clear waivers, so interesting note there. And then earlier today, we saw Minnesota's Travis Dermott be placed on waivers. Now, like I said, I'm not sure if he's going to clear or not. At this point in time, we don't know, but Dermott is a solid third pair defenseman, can be a solid 6th, 7th guy. He was acquired off of waivers earlier in the season from the Edmonton Oilers, so if the Oilers were the only team to put a claim in for him, there's a possibility they could reacquire him and send him down to the minors. Maybe there's another team who needs some defensive help who could acquire Dermott. I could see him be claimed off of waivers, so we're going to have to wait and see on that, but Minnesota has placed Travis Dermott on waivers and could wind up sending him to the minors if he clears. If he doesn't, they could be a waiver claim. We'll have to wait and see. Well, Juuso Valimaki in Utah was placed on and cleared waivers, so some interesting waiver updates from our past couple of days. Next, on over to a small trade we saw yesterday. It was an interesting one, but I don't think it was a huge one, which is why I didn't make a separate video about it. I was just going to talk about it in today's video. But the Detroit Red Wings have traded Ville Husso to the Anaheim Ducks for future considerations. It's a small trade. It's an interesting one. Husso was acquired a couple of years back from the St. Louis Blues by Detroit, was signed to a 3-year deal, was supposed to be the Red Wings starter for the next couple of years while they have Costa in the AHL. Never really worked out. The first year he was all right, but didn't do overly well. Last year was heavily injured, and that allowed guys like Alex Lyon to sort of step into the role. This year, they brought in Talbot, Lyon, and Husso at the NHL level to start with, and after a few games, Husso didn't do overly well and was placed on waivers and sent to the minors. Has basically been the team's third stringer ever since. So the Red Wings have a whole bunch of goalies. Like, they have Campbell in the AHL system, they have Costa in the AHL system, and they have Talbot and Lyon at the NHL level. They don't really need Husso, plus they need to try and get some more cap space to go after some other players they could before a trade deadline. So they moved him to the Anaheim Ducks. Now the Ducks have Gibson and Dostal at the NHL level. However, Gibson, like we just talked about, recently went down with an injury, so it doesn't sound like Gibson will be able for an overly long period of time, but if they did need someone at the NHL level, they could call up Husso. And I think even if they were to keep Gibson, it'll stall beyond the trade deadline and not move Gibson, Husso could be a very serviceable third pair guy, and especially with the injury history of Gibson, it might be a really smart move for the Ducks that has some added goaltender depth. So in my opinion, I think this is a smart move for both sides. It gives the Ducks some goaltending depth, gives them a guy who has NHL experience and can come in if Gibson gets injured again, and for the Red Wings, it clears some cap space that they can go out to try and acquire new things, and they had a surplus of goaltenders, so they didn't really need Husso. So all in all, it's an interesting trade. I personally do think that the Ducks win this one because they get Husso for nothing and they have cap space to spare, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on who you think won this deal down in the comment section below. Next, we're over to 2 suspension updates that we heard about over the past couple of days. First, when it comes to Ryan Hartman, we talked about this, I think it was last week, that Ryan Hartman had suffered a 10-game suspension for intent to injure on Senators for Tim Stützle. He had appealed the situation, so they re-looked at it. Then the ruling came out just a little while ago, and they have reduced Ryan Hartman's suspension. I thought originally, when they said it would be a potential 5+ game suspension, that it would be 5 to 6 games. I was surprised by them giving him 10 games, even though I think it was justified. Well, they have reduced it from 10 games down to 8 games. So, as a Sens fan, not exactly sure how I'm feeling about this. I think player safety, reducing it by 1 or 2 games is not too surprising. We saw that happen, I think it was last year when Perron got like a 6-game suspension. I think they reduced it down to 5. So, 8-game suspension puts him at available coming back on March 4th. So that's a little bit good news for Ryan Hartman. It seems like he won't appeal any further. I think he's okay with having him suspended 8 games. But still, interesting note there that they originally gave him a 10-game suspension and have reduced it to 8 games. So interesting note there. And we saw a new guy get suspended, and that's Travis Dermott. Zegras over the weekend had a bad hit on Detroit Red Wings forward Michael Rasmussen. He had a shoulder to head hit. It was a really bad hit, and player safety has deemed it a 3-game suspension. Now, I originally thought when I saw that hit it would be a 2 to 3 game suspension, so I was right on this one. It was a 3-game suspension, so I think that's sort of justified. That was an awful play from Zegras. It was a 5-minute major game misconduct. He was thrown out of the game, so I think this is the right move by player safety to suspend Zegras for 3 games. Now Zegras probably won't play again until next week, so interesting note there. But Zegras in Anaheim has been suspended 3 games, while Ryan Hartman in Minnesota has had his suspension reduced from 10 games to 8 games. So interesting suspension updates from our past couple of days. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So to start with here today, we're going to look at a whole bunch of trade rumors. There have been a whole bunch of news from our past couple of days. We'll start off with a couple of potential extensions. Darren Dreger put out a tweet recently saying that the Utah Hockey Club and goaltender Ville Husso are working towards an extension and are trying to work something out before trade deadline. Now, Vejmelka has been a really solid goaltender this year for the Utah Hockey Club, and Dreger says on that tweet that they have had a lot of goaltending signings like Thompson and some of those other guys late in the offseason, but right before the season started, like Rantanen as well, that have signed recently that are comparables to Vejmelka. So I'm thinking Vejmelka's probably looking for like a 3 to 4 year deal, like $5 million or somewhere around there. That's my guess. It'll be interesting to see if Utah and Vejmelka are able to work together and come to terms in an extension. I think if they could keep Vejmelka, have a Vejmelka-Ingram tandem for foreseeable future, that could be really good for Utah, because I think those two are really good goaltenders. Well, once again, we'll have to wait and see if this winds up coming to fruition, and Dreger says that if they can't work together on an extension, then Vejmelka is still a trade possibility at a trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with Utah, but Vejmelka could potentially get extended soon. Going over to Carolina, Elliotte Friedman on his Saturday Night Headlines segment was talking about Mikko Rantanen, and he mentioned that the Carolina Hurricanes have offered a major contract offer to Mikko Rantanen. He says that the total contract value would be in the 9-figure dollars, so over $100 million for the entire money throughout the length of that deal. On his recent podcast, he elaborated on this. He doesn't think that the Hurricanes offered him an AAV of around $40 million, but he also doesn't think it was somewhere as low as $12.5 million. So the Canes seem to have offered Rantanen somewhere between $12.5 and $14 million to keep him. Now we're going to have to wait and see. Rantanen may still want to try and test the free agent markets. I'm not exactly sure if Rantanen wants to remain in Carolina, and the offer might still be even too low for Rantanen. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. There has been some announcements from Friedman that the Canes have made a contract offer to Rantanen, and we'll have to wait and see if that winds up coming to fruition or not. Some other things that Elliotte Friedman was talking about in his recent podcast, he touched on Brock Boeser, saying that term is the big problem for the Canucks and Boeser. Boeser. My guess is the Canucks really want to go a little bit more longer term. Boeser might want to go a little more shorter term. So it seems like term's something they're going to have to work through. I have heard that Minnesota as a new team has been linked to Brock Boeser as a potential trade candidate. Boeser was linked to Minnesota for quite some time. During the last time he was about to become a UFA, before the Canucks signed him. I think he's from Minnesota. He has connections to the Wild. So, I mean, personally, I can see why the Wild would want to acquire Boeser. We know they need a center, but a scoring winger could also be a really big boost for the Wild. And like I said, if the Canucks don't have an extension in place with Boeser at the trade deadline, I think there's a very likely chance they could trade him. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But Elliotte Friedman does say that term is the biggest sticking point between the Canucks and Boeser in contract negotiations. He also talked about Boston Bruins bomb 6'4" Frederic, saying that there's a lot more interest in Frederic in the last little while. It sounds like the Bruins might try and be cautious going into the trade deadline, but there is a lot more growing speculation there will be sellers. Frederic's in the final year of his deal. He could command a really high asking price as a UFA, and the Bruins may not want to try and sign him to that. So I think Frederic's probably one of the more likely Bruins to get dealt. Like I said, I think there's a very likely possibility that Frederic and Geeky are the two main guys who will get dealt by Boston before the trade deadline, unless Boston miraculously is able to get themselves into a secure playoff spot. But I do think there's a very likely chance we could see Frederic and Geeky get moved. So more interest in Frederic is not too surprising to me, and I think there's a very likely chance we will see a Trent Frederic move at some point. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that. Going back to the Utah Hockey Club, when it comes to Utah, Elliotte Friedman was also speculating about some names that he could be hearing over the next week and a half leading up to that trade deadline. And he says that Matias Maccelli might be one to watch out for. He says Maccelli has not had an overly great season. He's been healthy scratched recently a couple of times and sort of fallen out of favor in Utah after a pretty good season last year. I think he signed for like 2 or 3 more seasons at like $3.5 million. So it wouldn't be an overly huge price tag for a lot of teams to get. And Maccelli's on the younger side of things, and he can produce some really solid depth scoring on like a second or third line role. So we're going to have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But Elliotte Friedman does mention Maccelli as a potential trade candidate for Utah, and I personally think there's a possibility with all the younger players that started to come up in Utah, Maccelli falling down the trade board. I can see why Utah potentially want to move on from Maccelli. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the 2 bigger things that Elliotte Friedman was talking about on both the Saturday Night Headline segment and on a 32 Thoughts podcast. Now, on both listings, he was talking about the Schenn brothers and Thess Jones. Now, according to Elliotte Friedman, he says that multiple teams have been checking in with both St. Louis and Nashville to try and reunite the Schenn brothers in a new organization. Now, according to Elliotte Friedman, he says that teams do have interest in bringing Schenn after there were some reports coming out that the Blues will be open to the idea of moving him. And I know that Luke Schenn has this year plus next year just over $3 million. So this will be a massive move for teams to pull off cap-wise, but it could really help. Like, Schenn's a solid top 4 left shot defenseman, and other Schenn is a solid second line, third line center. So if they could reunite Braden and Luke in a new team, it would be interesting. Teams that I think could potentially have some interest in trying to do this will be Toronto. We know that Toronto's been linked to both Luke and Braden Schenn recently. I would not be overly surprised if they were one of the teams trying to do that. Vancouver, we know that Luke Schenn fit in quite well in Vancouver, and the Canucks really do need another center. So could they try and do that? That's a possibility. There's a couple of other teams, like I've seen Colorado be linked to Braden Schenn. Could they have an interest in both those guys? That's a possibility. Could Dallas try and add some more depth? That's a possibility too. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But Elliotte Friedman does mention that teams have asked about both Schenn's availabilities to try and bring both Schenns into one team. And he says that multiple teams have tried to do this. So it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, it would be an extremely high price tag, because I think the Blues would like a first-round pick and a solid prospect and probably roster player for Schenn, and then the Preds would probably want a second-round pick and a really good prospect for Luke Schenn. So it would take a team an extremely high amount of draft capital, prospects, and things like that to pull off that sort of a deal. But Braden Schenn and Luke Schenn both know what it takes to win the playoffs, and are both really good skilled players at their positions. So I can see why teams want to do it. I'm just not exactly sure if teams have the assets to do that sort of a deal. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on both Schenn brothers, as teams may have some interest in bringing them into their markets. And lastly, going over to the Chicago Blackhawks, according to Elliotte Friedman, he says that Thess Jones has made it known to the Blackhawks that he is open to being moved. He says that he wants to try and get traded to a contender. However, on the 32 Thoughts podcast, he did say that the Hawks will be open to trying to keep him if they aren't able to move him before the trade deadline. So it sounds like the Hawks will be open to keeping Thess Jones because he's a really solid top pair defenseman and one of the star players on that Hawks blue line, but they would be open to moving him for the right price. Now, I said this in a recent video when I was just talking about Seth Jones' availability. If the Hawks were willing to retain like between $1 and $2 million on his contract, I think a lot of teams could have some major interest in Jones at like between $7.5 and $8 million. Like that's not an overly hard ask, and I think that could also give the Hawks a decent return of like a first round pick and decent prospect. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee if Seth Jones gets moved. Once again, maybe it's an off-season move, or maybe the Hawks try and keep him. It's a possibility about that. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, and plus I think with the cap hit and with Elliotte Friedman definitely saying that he wants to go to a contender, with contenders not having too much cap space right now, it would be a really difficult ask to try and move Seth Jones in season, especially to a team who's contending for a playoff spot. There's been some talk about Columbus potentially having some interest. Elliotte Friedman wonders if the Matthew Tkachuk injury could be potentially season ending. The Panthers have some interest. We know they could definitely use a defensive upgrade. So there's definitely a couple of teams out there who I think could potentially fall into that contender category, who might intrigue Seth Jones. But it's interesting out there that he could be a guy who has and is hoping to get a fresh start and try and go to a contender. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I definitely think there's a strong possibility that if a trade could happen before a trade deadline, I think Seth Jones might be a guy who we have to watch out for. So definitely lots of intriguing things from our past couple of days. That's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. Leave a comment. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you see Seth Jones getting moved by Blackhawks, or will he stay there? Do you see any team pulling off a deal where they can get both Braden and Luke Schenn? And if so, what team do you think that could be? Do you think that the Utah Hockey Club moves Maccelli? And if so, what sort of return do you think they could get? Does Rantanen extend in Carolina or Vejmelka in Utah? And if so, what sort of a contract do you think those guys would get? And do you think Frederic gets moved by Boston? Definitely let your thoughts on all of that. Plus the injury updates, waiver updates, the trade that we saw from our past couple of days, and the suspension. Definitely let your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. If you like this video, if you're to subscribe below, think about your support and to love you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Would love to hear your thoughts on all of this. I also do a blog, talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. And can I see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.